Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where we explore tales that touch the heart and inspire transformation. Today, we bring you an emotional journey of resilience, love, and redemption. A story of a millionaire whose life changes forever after a brave teacher saves him and their paths intertwine in the most unexpected way. The rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the streets of Chicago into rivers of light and shadow. Ethan Caldwell gripped the steering wheel of his sleek black car, barely aware of the city rushing past him. The rhythmic hum of the engine offered no solace. The soft patter of rain on the windshield, no distraction from the storm raging inside his mind. Hours earlier, his life had taken an irreversible turn. Ethan had spent most of his 41 years pursuing success with relentless determination. As the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, his name was synonymous with power and prestige. He had everything a man could want, or so it seemed. But that afternoon, a phone call had shattered his carefully constructed world. His doctor's words echoed in his mind. "I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell. You won't be able to have children." Those few simple words carried the weight of finality, of a future he would never have, and they struck at the core of everything Ethan had built his life around. He had always envisioned a family, not just to carry on his name, but to fill the emptiness that even his immense wealth could not erase. Now, that dream was gone, and the hollow ache of failure settled in his chest like a stone. He drove aimlessly through the rain-soaked streets, his thoughts spiraling further into despair. His car glided past the illuminated windows of restaurants and bars, where people laughed and shared meals. The sight only deepened his sense of isolation. Lost in his thoughts, Ethan failed to notice the traffic light turning red until it was too late. The blaring horn of an oncoming truck jolted him back to reality. But the impact was unavoidable. Metal screamed against metal as his car spun wildly, shattering glass and filling the air with the acrid smell of burning rubber. When the chaos subsided, Ethan was trapped in the wreckage, his body aching and his mind clouded with shock. Through the haze of pain, Ethan heard footsteps splashing through the puddles. A voice, strong, steady, and filled with urgency, cut through the darkness. "Stay with me? Don't give up." A woman appeared at the edge of his vision, her dark curls plastered to her face by the rain. She wasted no time, her hands bloody as she worked to pry open the twisted door. "I'll get you out," she said, her voice trembling with effort, but unwavering in its resolve. Ethan felt her arms around him, pulling him free just as flames began to lick at the edges of the wreckage. She shielded him with her body as they stumbled away from the car, both of them drenched and shivering in the cold rain. "What's your name?" he whispered, his voice faint but desperate to know more about the woman who had saved him. "Maya," she replied, her voice soft yet resolute. "Maya Brooks." Her name anchored him, a beacon of hope in the chaos. As darkness claimed him again, he clung to her name like a lifeline. When Ethan awoke in the hospital, the sterile scent of antiseptic filled his nostrils. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor grounded him in the present, though his thoughts remained scattered. A nurse informed him that a woman had pulled him from the wreckage and stayed by his side until the paramedics arrived. She didn't leave her contact information, the nurse said. Just her name, Maya Brooks. Ethan couldn't get her out of his mind. In his world of deals and contracts, everything had a price. Yet this woman, a complete stranger, had risked her life for him without asking for anything in return. He felt a profound sense of gratitude. But it was more than that. Maya's bravery and selflessness stirred something deep within him, something he hadn't felt in years. As soon as he was discharged from the hospital, Ethan used his considerable resources to find her. It didn't take long to discover that Maya Brooks was a teacher at Franklin Elementary School on Chicago's South Side, known for her unwavering dedication to her students. She worked tirelessly to provide them with opportunities she had never had herself. Her modest life stood in stark contrast to the luxury Ethan had always known, but it only deepened his admiration for her. Standing outside the school, Ethan adjusted his coat, an unfamiliar nervousness fluttering in his chest. He had faced boardrooms full of powerful executives without breaking a sweat. Yet here he was, hesitating like a schoolboy. Finally, he took a deep breath and stepped inside, the scent of old books and chalk dust greeting him as he walked down the hall. He found her in the gymnasium, sorting supplies for a donation drive. Her dark curls framed her face, and her warm smile lit up the room as she chatted with parents. When she noticed him, her smile faltered, replaced by cautious curiosity. "Mr. Caldwell?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. "What are you doing here?" "I came to thank you," Ethan said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "You saved my life." Maya shrugged, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Ethan replied, shaking his head. "They wouldn't have. Please, let me do something for you." Maya's jaw tightened, and she crossed her arms. "I don't need your money, Mr. Caldwell. Just live better." Her words hit him like a lightning bolt, reverberating in the empty spaces within him. They were a challenge, a call to action, and he couldn't ignore them. As Ethan left the school, her words echoed in his mind, stirring something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. For the first time in years, he began to question what it truly meant to live a meaningful life. Ethan Caldwell found himself returning to Franklin Elementary School more often than he ever could have imagined. At first, it was under the guise of donations, boxes of school supplies, funding for extracurricular programs, and grants for teacher training. But the truth was simpler and more personal. He wanted to see Maya Brooks again. Her world, so far removed from his towering offices and luxury cars, had an authenticity that fascinated him. The worn brick walls of the school, the colorful chaos of children's artwork taped to classroom doors, and the sound of Maya's laughter as she guided her students through science experiments. It was all so alive, so real. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so grounded. At first, Maya met his visits with polite formality, her guard firmly in place. She was wary of his intentions, uncertain why a man of his stature was lingering in her modest world. But as weeks passed, her skepticism softened. Ethan wasn't just writing checks. He was showing up. He read stories to the children, helped organize the donation drives, and even stayed late to clean up after school events. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there because he wanted to be. Their conversations grew deeper with time. During quiet moments, as they packed backpacks with donated supplies or sorted books for the library, Ethan began to open up. He shared stories of his childhood, of growing up under the relentless pressure of the Caldwell name, where success wasn't a choice but an expectation. He spoke of his father's cold demeanor, his mother's distant affection, and the emptiness that had haunted him despite his achievements. Maya listened without judgment, her hazel eyes soft with understanding. She, too, shared pieces of her story, a childhood spent in foster care, bouncing between homes and never quite feeling wanted. She spoke of the resilience she had to cultivate, of the moments when she chose to hope rather than despair. "That's why I became a teacher," she said one afternoon, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I wanted to give kids what I never had: a sense of stability, a belief that someone cares." Ethan admired her strength, her capacity to give so much of herself despite having so little. For a man who had spent most of his life surrounded by people chasing wealth and status, Maya's selflessness was both humbling and inspiring. She had risked her life to save his, not for recognition or reward, but simply because she believed it was the right thing to do. As their bond deepened, Ethan began to see a different future for himself, one that wasn't defined by skyscrapers and profit margins, but by connection and purpose. He didn't know what that future looked like yet, but he knew Maya was at the heart of it. One evening, after a particularly long day, Maya invited Ethan to her modest apartment for coffee. The space was small but warm, filled with mismatched furniture and the scent of cinnamon candles. It was nothing like the sterile perfection of Ethan's penthouse, but he felt more at ease there than he ever had at home. As they sat on the couch, sipping coffee from chipped mugs, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how much his life had changed since meeting her. Then Maya took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she set her mug down. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. He leaned forward, concern flickering in his eyes. "What is it?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands before looking back at him. "I'm pregnant. With twins." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Ethan stared at her, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. A revelation. A gift. "Twins," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya nodded, her expression cautious. "The father. He's not in the picture, and I don't want him to be." A flood of emotions surged through Ethan: shock, joy, sadness, and an overwhelming need to protect her and the unborn children. He reached out, covering her hands with his. "Maya, I want to help, not because I think you need saving, but because I care. About you. About them." She pulled her hands back, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Ethan, I don't need a savior. I've been doing this on my own for a long time." "This isn't about saving you," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "It's about being here. For you. For them. If you'll let me." Maya searched his eyes, looking for any sign of insincerity. What she found was something that surprised her: earnestness, vulnerability, and a quiet determination. After a long silence, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly, "but no grand gestures. No buying your way in. Just be here. I promise." Ethan replied, his voice filled with resolve. As they sat together in the quiet apartment, the weight of the moment settled over them. They both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, they faced it not as two individuals carrying their burdens alone, but as a team, together. They began to imagine a future that neither of them had dared to hope for. A future filled with love, resilience, and the promise of new beginnings. The months that followed were both challenging and transformative for Ethan Caldwell and Maya Brooks. Their bond grew stronger as they navigated the ups and downs of Maya's pregnancy together. For Ethan, the experience was a revelation, a chance to witness firsthand the grit and grace of a woman determined to do right by her children, even as her body carried the strain of two new lives. For Maya, Ethan's steady presence began to chip away at the walls she had built over years of hardship and self-reliance. Ethan showed up for everything. He attended every doctor's appointment, even when the waiting room stares reminded him just how far his world of tailored suits and corporate power was from Maya's. He painted the nursery with a nervous energy, his hands speckled with pale yellow paint as he carefully hung glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. When Maya's feet swelled and her back ached, Ethan read to her in the evenings, his deep voice calming her as they sat together on her worn couch. But it wasn't just the small acts of care that solidified their bond. It was the quiet moments in between, the shared laughter over a failed attempt to assemble a crib, the long walks through Maya's neighborhood as they talked about their hopes and fears, and the way Ethan would sit beside her, holding her hand, as she confided in him about her worries for the future. Maya was used to standing on her own, but with Ethan, she began to learn the strength it took to let someone in. As winter crept into Chicago, Maya's pregnancy became more difficult. By the 8th month, her exhaustion was palpable, her body stretched to its limits. The whispers and stares in their respective circles didn't help. Ethan faced skepticism from his corporate peers, who couldn't understand why he was spending so much time with a schoolteacher from the South Side. Maya endured the quiet judgment of some colleagues, who wondered aloud if her relationship with Ethan was a mistake. But neither of them allowed the noise to shake their commitment to one another. Everything came to a head on a frigid morning in February. Maya doubled over in pain, her vision swimming as sharp cramps radiated through her body. Ethan rushed her to the hospital, his heart pounding with fear as the doctors confirmed what he had dreaded. Maya had developed preeclampsia, a dangerous condition that required immediate intervention. The decision was made to deliver the twins early. Ethan stayed by Maya's side, donning surgical scrubs and refusing to leave the operating room. "I'm here," he whispered, gripping her hand as the doctors prepared for the delivery. "I'm not going anywhere." Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with fear but also trust. "I know," she said softly. The minutes dragged into what felt like hours. The sterile beeping of monitors punctuated by the urgent commands of the medical team. And then, finally, the sound they had been waiting for, the piercing cries of two newborns. Tears streamed down Ethan's face as he saw them for the first time. Tiny and perfect, their small fists waving in protest at the cold air. What should we name them? Ethan asked, his voice thick with emotion. Maya, weak but smiling, whispered, Ava and Lily, for strength and grace. The twins were rushed to the neonatal intensive care unit, their fragile bodies needing time and care to grow stronger. For weeks, Ethan and Maya rarely left their sides. They read stories, sang lullabies, and held their tiny hands through the incubators, marveling at the resilience of these little lives that had already fought so hard to be here. When Ava and Lily were finally strong enough to go home, Ethan and Maya brought them to an apartment that no longer felt like a temporary shelter, but a true home. The nursery was a labor of love, with hand-painted murals on the walls and glowing stars on the ceiling, a promise of the bright future that lay ahead. The once quiet and lonely space now echoed with laughter, soft coos, and the occasional cry, filling it with warmth and life. On the twins' first birthday, the apartment was filled with friends, family, and neighbors, all gathered to celebrate the milestones of a year marked by love and perseverance. As Ava and Lily giggled at their cake, smearing frosting on their tiny faces, Ethan knelt before Maya, holding a small box in his hand. You've given me more than I ever thought possible, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. You've shown me what love truly is, what family truly means. I love you, Maya. I love our daughters. Will you marry me? Tears welled in Maya's eyes as she nodded, her smile radiant. Yes, Ethan, I will. The room erupted in cheers as Ethan slipped the simple, elegant ring onto her finger. They embraced, their daughters giggling in their arms, the weight of the world lifting as they stood together, ready to face the future as a family. Ethan knew that his wealth, his skyscrapers, and his empire would never compare to the legacy he was building now. This was his true success, not in the numbers on a balance sheet, but in the love and laughter of his family. And as the sun set over Chicago that evening, casting a golden glow over the city, Ethan and Maya knew that they had found something far greater than they had ever imagined. They had found each other, and they had found a life worth living together. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey of love, courage, and new beginnings. Stories like Ethan and Maya's remind us that true wealth lies in meaningful connections and shared purpose. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need a reminder of the beauty in selflessness and love. Stay tuned for more stories that inspire hope and empathy. Until next time, take care and cherish the connections that matter most.